I stood near the edge of the ballroom with a glass of champagne I hadn't touched, watching my sister Madison glide through the room like she owned it. The hotel staff had done everything short of laying out a red carpet. Crystal chandeliers, white roses stacked so high they blocked half the mirrors, a jazz trio playing softly enough to sound expensive. 300 people, maybe more. Lawyers, consultants, a few local politicians, people who hugged too hard and asked questions like they were checking boxes. This was Madison's engagement party, and it was exactly what you'd expect from her. Perfect. Polished. Loud in that controlled way that says money without ever saying the number. I wore a simple black dress and flats. Not because I didn't own anything nicer, but because I'd learned a long time ago that showing up understated kept the questions shorter. When you look like you don't need attention, people feel less compelled to give you advice. My mother appeared beside me, already flushed from her second or third refill. "You can't hide over here all night," she said, scanning the room. "Madison wants everyone to meet everyone." She steered me through clusters of people who smiled politely when she said my name, then immediately turned back to Madison as soon as she moved on. At one table she stopped and gave a practiced introduction. "This is my other daughter. Not my oldest. Not even my full name first. Just my other daughter." "Oh, right," a woman said, nodding like she'd finally placed a coat she'd seen once. "You're the one in the army. Computers, right?" "Cyber operations," I corrected gently. "That must be interesting," she said in the tone people use when they mean temporary. Madison appeared at my shoulder, radiant, and relaxed her ring, catching the light every time she moved her hand. She leaned in and kissed my cheek, careful not to smudge anything. "You made it," she said, smiling for the benefit of the group. "I wasn't sure with your schedule." I told her congratulations. She thanked me and launched straight back into a story about a recent project, one that involved words like strategic and transformative, the kind that float nicely without landing anywhere specific. Someone asked me how long I'd been stationed where I was now. Someone else asked if I planned to do that forever. Another wanted to know if I'd ever thought about transitioning into the private sector because there was real money there. Madison listened to these questions with the faintest hint of amusement, like a parent letting a child explain their favorite cartoon. I answered what I could, kept it short, kept it factual. Years in service. Current assignment. No. I wasn't sure what came next. No, I wasn't dating anyone seriously. That last one always landed heavier than it needed to. A woman I didn't recognize leaned closer. "You're very independent," she said, smiling kindly. "That can be challenging." Madison laughed softly. "She's always been like that," she said. "Very particular." The word hung there. Particular. It had followed me since college, since I chose ROTC over law school, since I decided structure suited me better than cocktail hours. Particular was Madison's polite way of saying difficult, and everyone in our family understood the translation. I excused myself and moved back toward the edge of the room, where the noise dulled into something manageable. From there I could see everything. Madison greeting her fiancé's parents. Madison posing for photos. Madison laughing at something that wasn't funny because the person telling it mattered. My phone buzzed in my hand. "How's it going?" The message read. I typed back, "Still alive. Need a rescue." "Not yet." I slipped the phone back into my clutch and watched as the servers brought out another round of drinks. The cake stood on display near the center, tall and white, decorated with sugar flowers that probably cost more than my first car. People gathered around it, taking pictures like it was a celebrity. My father found me near the windows. He looked uncomfortable in his suit, tugging at the collar. "Big crowd," he said. "Madison likes a full room," I said. He nodded. "She's always been good at this." That was as close as he ever came to acknowledging the difference between us. Madison filled rooms. I filled spreadsheets, briefings, secure networks. Different skills. Different applause. The jazz trio stopped playing, and the hum of conversation dipped. Madison's fiancé tapped his glass, smiling as he waited for attention. He thanked everyone for coming, talked about meeting Madison, about how he knew right away she was someone special. The words were rehearsed but sincere enough. When Madison took the microphone, the room leaned in. She thanked their parents, their friends, the people who'd supported them. She talked about partnership and balance and finding someone who fit your life. Then she turned slightly and reached out her hand, settling on my arm. "And my sister," she said, drawing me a step closer without really asking. "Natalie's always been there for me, even though we're very different." A ripple of polite laughter moved through the room. "She's brilliant," Madison continued. "Truly. But she's never been interested in all this." She gestured around. "Some people just aren't built for relationships. They're happier on their own." I felt the weight of every face shift toward me, that familiar mix of curiosity and relief. Relief that it wasn't them. Madison squeezed my arm, her smile warm and practiced. "She's just very difficult," she said lightly. "And that's okay." Laughter followed, softer this time, but it landed the same. I looked down at the carpet, then back up and nodded once. "You're right," I said quietly. The room relaxed. People smiled again. The moment passed, packaged neatly as humor. Applause filled the space, and Madison handed the microphone back, already turning away, already moving on. The music started again. The servers rolled the cake forward. Cameras flashed. My phone vibrated in my hand. I unlocked it without looking up and typed a single line. "Review their proposal like any other contractor. No exceptions." The reply came back almost immediately. "Understood." I slipped the phone away and reached for my glass, finally taking a sip. The champagne was warm and flat. Across the room, Madison laughed as someone clinked a fork against a plate, calling for everyone to gather closer to the cake. As the knife touched frosting, her phone buzzed against the table. She glanced at it, frowned, then smiled again for the cameras, lifting the knife as if nothing had happened. The knife slid through the frosting with a soft scrape, and someone clapped as the first slice tipped onto a plate. I felt the vibration of it through the floor, more than I heard it, the way you do when a room decides everything is fine again. People lined up for cake, laughing, comparing photos already done with the moment that had just passed. Madison's phone buzzed again on the table. She flipped it face down without looking and kept smiling. That was one of her talents, deciding when something didn't deserve attention. Watching her work a room had always felt familiar. It was the same skill she'd had growing up, just upgraded with better lighting and more expensive shoes. At home, Madison learned early that attention followed noise. She talked fast, laughed loud, and filled silences before anyone else could. Teachers loved her. Coaches remembered her name. My parents bragged about her without meaning to. "She's a natural," my mom would say, like it explained everything. I learned something else. If you didn't interrupt, people assumed you had nothing to say. If you waited your turn, the conversation moved on without you. So I stopped trying to compete. I found quieter ways to win. In high school, Madison was student council debate team volunteer hours that came with photos in the local paper. I spent afternoons in a windowless room learning how systems broke and how to put them back together. When I brought home a robotics trophy, my dad asked if it would help me get into law school. When Madison brought home a certificate for leadership, my mom framed it. At dinner, Madison talked. I listened. When relatives asked about us, the questions came in a predictable order. Madison first. Her plans, her goals, her future. Then a pause, like someone remembered a light they forgot to turn off. "And Natalie," they'd say, glancing my way. "Still into computers?" I nodded. That was usually enough. The first time the word difficult came up, I was 17. Madison had just broken up with a boyfriend and was pacing the kitchen, venting to anyone within range. I suggested she stop texting him back. She stopped and stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "You're impossible," she said, laughing. "This is why guys don't stick around with you. You're too difficult." Everyone laughed, including my parents. It sounded harmless, the way jokes do when they aren't aimed at you. The word stuck. In college, when I joined ROTC, Madison told people I was very disciplined. It sounded like a compliment until she followed it with, "She needs structure. Relationships are messy." When I chose the Army over a corporate internship, she shook her head and said I was limiting myself. When I deployed for the first time, she told friends I was brave, then asked me privately if I was worried about falling behind. Behind what exactly was never clear. At family gatherings, Madison gave updates on promotions, new projects, people she'd met. I talked about where I was stationed when I was moving again. Someone once asked if I was lonely. Madison answered for me. "She's fine alone," she said. "She prefers it." It wasn't true, but it was convenient. 6 years ago, I brought someone home for Thanksgiving. Not to dinner, just to pick me up afterward. Madison noticed immediately. She always did. She waited until we were alone in the hallway and asked who he was. I told her his name. Her smile tightened. "Be careful," she said. "Men like that don't end up with women like you." I asked what that was supposed to mean. She said she was being realistic. She listed my faults like she was reading from a report. I didn't dress right. I didn't enjoy parties. I didn't know how to play the game. She said it wasn't an insult, just an observation. That relationship ended quietly a few months later. Life moved on. Madison told everyone she'd been right. By then, I'd learned the pattern. Madison framed herself as the helpful one, the honest one, the sister who told hard truths. The family accepted it because it made things simple. If I was single, it was because I was difficult. If I moved again, it was because I couldn't settle. If I didn't share details, it was because I was closed off. No one had to ask if maybe I just didn't want to perform my life for them. The Army didn't care about any of that. It cared whether I showed up on time, whether I did my job, whether I kept my people safe. There were clear rules and clear consequences. If something failed, you fixed it. If someone overpromised, it showed. No one laughed it off. That contrast made family gatherings harder, not easier. Back in the ballroom, Madison leaned close to her fiancé, whispering something that made him laugh. She picked up her phone again, glanced at the screen, then tucked it into her clutch. For a moment, her smile slipped. Just a flicker. Then it was back. My mother joined me by the cake table, holding 2 plates. She handed me one. "You did great," she said, like I'd just survived a test. I asked what that meant. She waved a hand. "You didn't make it awkward. That was the standards. Don't make it awkward. Don't correct Madison. Don't push back. Don't turn the spotlight." I took a bite of cake. It was too sweet. Everything about the night was designed to be impressive, not comfortable. Across the room, a group of Madison's colleagues gathered around her, asking about work. I caught pieces of the conversation. Big client, long courtship, a CEO who was hard to reach, but worth the effort. Madison spoke with confidence, using phrases like, "when we close" and "next phase." People nodded, impressed. She'd always been good at selling certainty. Someone tapped a glass again, calling for another photo. Madison handed her phone to a friend and stepped forward, positioning herself just right. As the flash went off, her phone buzzed in the friend's hand. The friend frowned, then handed it back. Madison glanced at the screen, her brow creasing for a second before she smoothed it out. She laughed too loudly at something someone said and leaned into her fiancé's side. I set my plate down and stepped away from the table, feeling the hum of the room settle back into its rhythm. The music picked up again. Conversations overlapped. The night continued. Madison caught my eye from across the room. She lifted her glass in a small toast, her smile sharp and familiar, like she'd just proven a point she'd been making for years. I nodded back steady and stayed where I was. I slipped my phone back into my clutch and shifted my weight, the strap of my heels digging into my heel in a way that reminded me I'd been standing too long. It was the same quiet signal my body always gave me when it was time to disengage. Find a wall. Find a corner. Regain control. Control was something the Army taught early. You didn't get it by talking louder. You got it by knowing what mattered and ignoring the rest. My life away from rooms like this ran on schedules and checklists. Morning briefs, secure systems, long days where nothing flashy happened but everything stayed upright because it did. I'd spent the last decade moving between bases, commands, and windowless offices where no one cared if you were charming. They cared if you were accurate. Cyber operations isn't dramatic. It's careful. It's knowing that a small mistake can ripple outward in ways you don't get to see until it's too late. It's sitting through meetings where people argue about priorities while you quietly flag the one thing that will actually break if it's ignored. I was good at it. Not loud good. Dependable good. That was how I met Daniel. He was part of a contractor team brought in to support a joint project, the kind that required clearances and a lot of patience. He wasn't the loudest person in the room either. He listened more than he spoke, asked questions that went straight to the point, and didn't waste time trying to impress anyone who couldn't approve his access. We worked across from each other for weeks before we talked about anything personal. Lunches were quick and functional. Conversations stayed inside the lines. There were rules about that sort of thing, and we followed them. It wasn't until the project wrapped and the pressure eased that he asked if I wanted coffee. Not drinks. Not a late night. Coffee in the middle of the day where anyone could see us. That was how most things went with him. Clean, intentional. Dating him didn't look like what my family imagined dating was supposed to look like. There were no big gestures, no posts, no group photos. We worked around travel schedules and early mornings. When one of us was exhausted, the other understood. When something had to stay vague, it stayed vague. At some point, the line between personal and professional stopped feeling like a barrier and started feeling like a shared language. We got married on a Tuesday. No speeches. No guest list that needed managing. Just a courthouse, 2 friends we trusted, and paperwork that mattered more than pictures. I wore a simple dress. He wore a suit he'd owned for years. We went to lunch afterward and went back to work the next day. Keeping it quiet wasn't a dramatic decision. It was practical. My job required discretion. His required it even more. He was moving into roles where visibility came with risk and privacy wasn't optional. We agreed early on that the fewer people who knew details, the better. That included my family, not because I was hiding something from them, but because they didn't need access. I never announced promotions either. I never sent updates when my responsibilities grew or when my name started showing up on things that mattered. In my world, you didn't broadcast until you had to. Madison's world worked differently. She shared everything. New clients, new connections, names that sounded important when you dropped them at dinner. Her confidence grew with the audience. Mine didn't need one. When she asked about my personal life, I kept my answers small. I'm fine, busy, work's good. She took that as confirmation of whatever she already believed. At first, I considered telling her. I ran through the scenarios in my head the way I did with everything else. The questions, the disbelief, the jokes framed as concern, the comparisons. How quickly my life would become something she felt entitled to evaluate. Then I remembered the hallway conversation years earlier. The way she'd said men like that don't end up with women like you. The certainty in her voice. I decided not to correct her. It wasn't a test. It wasn't a plan. It was just easier to let her assumptions sit where she'd placed them. I didn't need her approval, and I didn't want her commentary. Daniel understood that immediately. He never pushed. When my family came up, he listened and asked questions that didn't try to fix anything. When holidays rolled around, we made our own plans. Sometimes that meant travel. Sometimes it meant staying home and doing nothing at all. The quiet suited us. As his career shifted, the stakes around his work grew. Board meetings replaced team check-ins. Decisions carried more weight. People pitched him constantly trying to sell solutions that didn't solve real problems. He learned to spot overpromising quickly. I watched from the side close enough to understand, far enough to stay clear of his lane. We had rules about that too. No mixing roles, no back-channeling, no favors. That boundary mattered. Back in the ballroom, Madison's laughter cut through the music again. Someone clinked a glass. Another photo. Another round of applause. The night kept rewarding her exactly the way it always had. My phone buzzed once more in my clutch, the vibration short and sharp. I didn't look at it right away. I didn't need to. Across the room, Madison was explaining something to a man in a gray suit, her hands moving as she spoke. I caught a phrase as I passed behind them. It's been months of work, but we're almost there. She said it with the kind of confidence that assumed momentum was the same thing as certainty. I moved toward the doors leading to the terrace, stepping out into the cooler air for a moment. The city lights reflected off the glass, distant and steady. I let the noise fade behind me. There was nothing in that room I needed to prove. When I went back inside, the cake was half gone. The music louder, the conversations looser. Madison's phone rested in her hand, now her thumb hovering over the screen, as if she was debating whether to check it again. I passed her without stopping, feeling the familiar calm settle back into place. The kind that comes from knowing exactly where you stand even when no one else does. The music dipped again, not all the way this time, just enough to tell the room something else was coming. Glasses paused mid-air. Conversation softened. Madison stepped toward the microphone like she'd rehearsed the distance. She took it with an easy grip and waited for the quiet to settle. It always did. She thanked people again because that's what you do when the room is already on your side. She made a joke about the cake disappearing faster than expected. Laughter followed on cue. Then she talked about balance, about finding the right person at the right time, about how not everyone's path looks the same. I knew where this was going before she said my name. I always did. Natalie, she said, turning just enough so the lights caught her ring. My sister. A few heads turned my way. More followed. She's always been the smart one. Madison continued smiling. The disciplined one. The one who likes structure. More nods. Structure was safe. Structure sounded respectable. She's never really been interested in relationships. Madison said, her tone light, almost affectionate. Not everyone is built for that. Someone near the front laughed. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Madison glanced at me and held my gaze for half a second, just long enough to make sure I was paying attention. She's very particular, she added. Very set in her ways. There it was. The translation everyone knew. She's just difficult, Madison said, and this time she let the pause hang. And that's okay. The room reacted before I could count the seconds. Laughter rolled out in a wave, the kind that spreads because people don't want to be the only ones not in on the joke. Someone murmured something about knowing the type. Someone else smiled with sympathy. I felt my face warm, not from embarrassment exactly, but from the familiar irritation of being discussed like a case study. Madison reached out and rested her hand on my arm, her fingers light. I've tried to set her up over the years, she said. But I've made peace with the fact that some people are happier alone. She looked back at the crowd. And that's okay. We don't all need the same things. Applause followed, polite and approving. The kind that says well said without thinking too hard about what was actually said. I stood where I was aware of the weight of every glance, every half-formed opinion snapping into place. This was the version of me they'd all accepted because it made sense of why I didn't perform my life the way Madison did. Madison squeezed my arm once more and angled the microphone toward me. Right, she said softly, like an invitation. I didn't step closer. I didn't pull away. I met her eyes and nodded once. You're right. The room relaxed instantly. The tension dissolved. People smiled again. Someone clapped. Madison laughed and drew the microphone back as if that had been the end of it all along. She kissed my cheek and turned away, already moving toward her fiancé, already letting the moment settle into its new shape. The band picked up again. The servers resumed their rotes. The room corrected itself. I stayed where I was for a beat longer, then shifted aside as people flowed past me, eager to return to the celebration. A woman brushed my arm and murmured something about how brave I was. A man gave me a sympathetic nod like he was closing a file. I took a breath and let it out slowly. Not because I needed to calm down, but because it was habit. From across the room, Madison accepted congratulations, laughter bouncing off her like it always did. She leaned into conversations, her posture relaxed, her confidence untouched. The speech had landed exactly where she'd intended. She'd framed herself as generous, honest, supportive. She'd framed me as a fixed variable. Her phone sat on the edge of a nearby table screen, dark. I moved toward the bar and asked for water. The bartender slid the glass across without comment. I drank half of it in one go and set it down. Behind me, Madison launched into a story about a recent pitch, her voice carrying just enough to be heard. It's been months of work, she said. But when you know you've built the relationship, you can feel it. People leaned in. Questions followed. She answered them with practiced confidence, dropping the name of the firm she'd been courting, the caliber of the decision-makers involved. Someone whistled softly when she mentioned the size of the contract. 8 months, she said, laughing. Worth every minute. Her phone vibrated on the table, a short buzz that rattled the glass beside it. Madison glanced at it, then ignored it, finishing her sentence with a flourish. Another buzz followed, longer this time. She reached for the phone and checked the screen. Her smile tightening just slightly before she slipped it back into her clutch. She raised her glass and made another toast louder than the last. I watched the way her shoulders squared, the way she pushed through the interruption without missing a beat. That was Madison's other talent. She didn't let uncertainty show until she had to. I picked up my clutch and felt the familiar smoothness of my phone through the lining. The screen was dark now. Nothing more to do. The music swelled. People gathered closer to the cake again, forks in hand. Someone joked about saving a slice for later. Madison laughed too loudly, then laughed again as if to cover the first one. I shifted closer to the windows, the city lights steady and indifferent beyond the glass. The room moved around me, full of noise and certainty, full of people comfortable with the version of the story they'd just been given. Madison's phone buzzed once more, louder this time, vibrating against the table hard enough that someone noticed. She waved it off with a smile and cut another slice of cake frosting, smearing slightly as she pressed the knife down. I took a step back, letting the crowd close the space where I'd been standing, and stayed exactly where I was. The knife slid through another slice of cake, and the frosting folded over itself like it was supposed to. Madison handed the plate to someone without looking, her attention already back on the circle of people around her. Her voice carried easily, smooth and confident, the way it always did when she talked about work. She didn't brag in the obvious way. She framed everything as effort. Time invested. Relationships built. Sacrifice. It was a skill she'd perfected, making ambition sound like generosity. I leaned against a high table near the windows and listened without appearing to. Years in uniform had trained me to absorb information without reacting. You don't interrupt briefings. You don't correct people mid-sentence unless something's on fire. You wait. You watch. You file things away. Madison talked about meetings that ran long, about executives who were hard to pin down, about how persistence mattered more than talent. Someone asked how close the deal was. She smiled and took a sip of champagne before answering. "Very," she said. "We're past the hard part." That got a reaction. Raised eyebrows. A low whistle. A comment about how rare that kind of access was. She nodded, pleased. When you know how to speak their language, it's just a matter of time. I knew the language she was talking about. I also knew the one she didn't. The firm she was describing wasn't hard to identify. The way she talked about their portfolio. The way she mentioned security concerns without actually explaining them. The way she kept referring to the CEO as careful, private, very selective. There weren't many companies that fit that profile. There were even fewer CEOs who handled those decisions personally. I shifted my weight and took another sip of water, feeling the cool glass against my palm. The room felt warmer now, louder the way it does when people stop monitoring themselves. Madison's phone buzzed again in her clutch. She ignored it this time, laughing at something someone said, and kept talking. "Once this closes," she said, "everything changes." That was the line that did it. I didn't react outwardly. I didn't stiffen. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The realization settled quietly, slotting into place with everything else I already knew. This wasn't just any deal. This was Daniel's company. I watched Madison's face as she spoke, the certainty there, the assumption that proximity and persistence equaled inevitability. I'd seen that mindset before, just not in rooms like this. It was the kind of thinking that got projects approved without being ready, the kind that collapsed under real scrutiny. In my world, confidence without preparation didn't impress anyone. It triggered questions. Someone asked Madison how she'd managed to get so close to a firm that guarded its leadership so carefully. She laughed and waved a hand. "Connections," she said. "It's always connections." People nodded, satisfied with that explanation. I set my glass down and folded my hands in front of me, feeling the familiar steadiness settle in. This wasn't the first time I'd watched someone mistake access for leverage. It wasn't even the first time I'd watched it happen in my own family. Silence in the army isn't passive. It's intentional. You don't fill space just to hear your own voice. You don't correct people who haven't asked for correction. You let situations develop until they reveal what they're actually made of. Madison was still talking, still building momentum, still stacking assumptions on top of each other. The people around her responded exactly the way she expected them to. Admiration. Curiosity. A little envy. Her fiancé slipped an arm around her waist, smiling proudly. Someone congratulated him on marrying such a driven woman. He thanked them, clearly enjoying the attention. I caught Madison's eye briefly as she laughed at something else. There was no challenge in her look, no awareness. She saw me the way she always had, as background, as contrast. I reached into my clutch and felt my phone again, solid and familiar. The decision had already been made earlier, clean and uncomplicated. There was nothing left to add. No follow-up. No clarification. In another setting, another version of myself might have spoken up. Might have corrected the narrative. Might have pointed out that relationships built on assumptions don't survive contact with reality. This version didn't. The band shifted into a faster song. A few people moved toward the dance floor. Others clustered tighter around Madison, still eager to hear more about the deal that was apparently going to define her career. She lowered her voice and leaned in conspiratorially. "The proposal was strong," she said. "We tailored it exactly to what they need." That was when her phone buzzed again, longer this time, the vibration audible over the music. She frowned slightly and checked the screen, then slid the phone back into her clutch without responding. She didn't miss a beat. "Timing is everything," she said, lifting her glass. People raised theirs in return. I looked past them out through the glass at the city below. Traffic moved in steady lines. Lights changed on schedule. Systems doing what they were designed to do. My phone stayed silent in my hand. Madison's laughter rang out again, just a little sharper than before. She gestured as she spoke, her ring catching the light. The group around her shifted, bodies turning to keep her centered. Someone asked what she'd do after the deal closed. She laughed and said she'd finally take a vacation. Someone joked about earning it. She agreed a little too quickly. Her phone buzzed again. This time she didn't ignore it. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and her smile hesitated, not long enough for anyone to call it out, but long enough for me to notice. She angled away from the group and stepped toward a quieter corner, answering with a cheerful tone that didn't quite match her posture. I stayed where I was, watching the way her shoulders tightened as she listened, the way her free hand stilled, the way her laugh didn't come when it usually would have. People drifted back toward the cake, assuming the interruption was nothing. Music filled the space she'd left behind. Conversations resumed, already moving on. I picked up my clutch and adjusted the strap, feeling the weight settle comfortably against my shoulder. Everything in the room continued exactly as planned, just not in the way Madison thought. When she returned, her smile was back in place, but it didn't reach her eyes. She rejoined the group, laughing again, speaking louder now, as if volume alone could smooth the edges. I met her gaze once more briefly and nodded. Not in agreement, not in sympathy, just acknowledgement. Then I turned back toward the windows and let the night keep unfolding. Madison's laugh cut off mid-sentence as her phone vibrated again, this time sharp enough that the woman beside her glanced down at it. Madison tilted the screen away instinctively, like she could block the message by changing the angle, and smiled too quickly. "It's nothing," she said, waving a hand. "Just work." That earned her a few knowing nods. Busy people get interruptions. Important people get calls at bad times. The room accepted the explanation and kept moving. She slipped the phone back into her clutch and reached for another glass, her fingers brushing the stem before she actually picked it up. The small miss didn't register with anyone else. I noticed. The cake table was crowded again. Someone joked about taking leftovers home. Someone else asked where Madison and her fiancé were going for their honeymoon. She answered automatically, still smiling, still present, even as her phone buzzed again against her side. This time she didn't laugh it off. She glanced at her fiancé, murmured something about stepping away for a second, and threaded through the crowd toward the hallway outside the ballroom. The music swallowed her as soon as she crossed the threshold. People resumed talking as if nothing had happened. The band picked up a slower song. A couple started dancing near the center of the floor. The night kept its shape. I stayed where I was, watching the doorway Madison had disappeared through. The glass in my hand had warmed again. I set it down and folded my arms loosely, feeling the familiar steadiness settle back in. A few minutes passed, then a few more. Madison came back into the room with her phone still in her hand. Her smile was there, but it looked like something she'd put on quickly in a mirror that didn't quite reflect right. She rejoined her group, nodding as someone spoke, but she didn't jump back into the conversation the way she had before. Someone asked her a question. She answered, then checked her phone again. "What's going on?" her fiancé asked quietly, leaning closer. Nothing she said a little too fast. Just a clarification. That word again. Clarification. The kind people use when they don't want to say problem. She took a sip of champagne and winced slightly, then laughed it off. Someone near her made a joke about work never sleeping. Madison smiled and agreed. Her phone buzzed again. This time she didn't wait. She answered it where she stood, turning slightly away from the group. Her voice stayed pleasant, but her posture shifted shoulders, drawing in weight, shifting from one foot to the other. "Yes," she said. "I understand." A pause. Her brow creased. "No, I don't think there's been a misunderstanding," she said. "We were very clear." Another pause, longer this time. The music filled the space between her words. She nodded even though the person on the other end couldn't see it. "Of course. If that's your position?" When she hung up, she stayed still for a moment, phone pressed against her palm like she was grounding herself. Then she turned back to the group and smiled again, wider now, brighter. "All good," she said. "Just logistics." People accepted that too. They wanted to. No one at an engagement party is looking for cracks. The band announced another song. Applause followed. Someone clinked a fork against a plate, calling everyone back toward the cake for more photos. Madison stepped forward with her fiancé, positioning herself carefully, lifting the knife again. As the flash went off, her phone buzzed once more, vibrating hard enough that the knife shifted slightly in her hand. She steadied it, laughed and pressed down. The frosting smeared, just a little. "Oh," she said, laughing it off. "Guess it's a sign." People laughed with her. Someone joked about perfection being overrated. Madison laughed again, louder than before, and handed off another slice. Her phone buzzed again. This time the sound didn't disappear into the room. A few people heard it. A few people noticed the way she didn't answer right away. The way her eyes flicked down and then back up, calculating. She tucked the phone deeper into her clutch and raised her glass. "To patience," she said. People echoed the toast glasses clinking. I stepped back toward the windows, the city lights steady beyond the glass. The night air outside looked calm, distant from the controlled chaos inside. Behind me, Madison's voice carried again, but the rhythm was off. She talked faster now, filling space, circling back to points she'd already made. When someone asked a follow-up about the deal, she deflected with a joke and moved on. Her fiancé stayed close, his hand resting at her back, his expression attentive but concerned. He asked her something under his breath. She shook her head slightly, eyes still on the people in front of her. Another buzz. She checked the screen this time and didn't hide the reaction quickly enough. Confusion crossed her face, followed by something sharper. She turned away again, stepping toward the same hallway this time, moving faster. The people around her watched her go. Curiosity flickering across a few faces before being smoothed away. Someone shrugged and said work emergencies happen. Someone else asked where the bathroom was. The room adjusted. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. A server passed by with a tray of coffee cups. I took one and wrapped my hands around it, feeling the heat seep into my palms. The bitterness cut through the sugar coating the back of my throat. Madison came back a few minutes later. Phone tucked away, smile back in place. She laughed when someone said something about dancing and waved them off, claiming she needed to check on something first. Her fiancé watched her closely now. So did a few of her colleagues. The shift was subtle, but it was there. The certainty that had anchored her earlier had loosened. She caught my eye from across the room. For the first time all night, there was a question there. I held her gaze for a moment, then looked away back toward the windows, back toward the steady movement of the city beyond the glass. Inside, the music swelled again, conversations, overlapping laughter rising and falling. Madison's phone stayed quiet for almost a full minute. When it buzzed again, she didn't answer immediately. She stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then slipped it back into her clutch and lifted her glass once more. The room kept celebrating. The buzz finally stopped, and the quiet that followed felt heavier than the music ever had. Madison lifted her glass again, smiled too wide, and made her way back into a conversation like nothing had happened. It didn't work. People listened, but they watch now the way you do when you sense a shift and don't know what caused it. I finished my coffee and set the cup on a passing tray. The heat had done its job. I felt steady again. My mother found me near the windows, her voice lowered. "What was that about?" she asked, nodding toward Madison. Work, I said. She frowned. On a night like this, I shrugged. It happens. She studied my face for a moment as if expecting something else, then let it go. That was another family habit. If the answer didn't open a door easily, you stopped pushing. The party wound down the way all long nights do, slowly, then all at once. People said their goodbyes complimented the venue promised to call. Madison stood near the exit with her fiancé, thanking everyone, smiling, hugging, keeping her posture perfect even as her eyes flicked toward her clutch every few seconds. When it was just family left, the room changed. The lights came up slightly. The band packed away their instruments. Staff began clearing glasses and folding linens. The noise dropped into something manageable, something that let words carry farther than intended. Madison exhaled hard and handed her clutch to her fiancé. I need a minute, she said. He nodded, concern written plainly across his face, and stepped aside. She turned to us, my parents, me and Aunt, who hadn't left yet, and the smile finally slipped. Okay, she said. Something weird just happened. My father folded his arms. What kind of weird? Professional, Madison said quickly. Not personal. That distinction mattered to her. It always had. She paced once, then stopped in front of me. Natalie, she said, her voice sharp with urgency now. I need to ask you something. I met her gaze and waited. You work in cyber, she said. Defense stuff. You know people. Sometimes, I said. Do you know anyone at Ross Dynamics? She asked. The name landed exactly where I expected it to. My mother looked between us. Is that the company you've been talking about all night? Madison nodded without looking away from me. Yes, the one I've been pitching for months. My father tilted his head. I thought that was basically done. It was, Madison said. It is. Or it should be. She took a breath. I just got off the phone with their legal team. They're reassessing. The word sounded fragile coming from her. Reassessing what my mother asked. The proposal, Madison said. The entire relationship. My aunt murmured something under her breath and excused herself, suddenly remembering an early morning. Madison stepped closer to me. Natalie, she said again. Do you know anyone there? I felt the weight of the question settle in, not heavy, just precise. This was the moment she'd been circling without realizing it. I know the company, I said. Her eyes sharpened. That's not what I asked. My father shifted. Madison, what are you implying? I'm not implying anything, she said quickly. I'm asking. Because the timing is strange. Because this happened tonight. And because Natalie has been very quiet. My mother looked at me then. Is that true? She asked. I've been standing in the same room you have, I said. Madison let out a short laugh that didn't carry any humor. This is serious, she said. I've built 8 months of work around this. My promotion depends on it. My father frowned. Promotion? Yes, Madison said. Managing partner. This deal is key. My mother's eyes widened. Oh, Madison took that as encouragement. So if Natalie knows someone, anyone, this is the time to say it. I considered correcting her framing. About how timing doesn't work like that. About how deals don't hinge on nights or parties. I didn't. Why would that matter? I asked instead. She stared at me. Because if you have a connection, you could make a call. Clear things up. My father looked relieved. That seems reasonable, he said. If there's been a misunderstanding. Madison nodded eagerly. Exactly, a misunderstanding. I kept my voice level. What kind of misunderstanding? That we're not a good fit, she said, frustration creeping in. Which is ridiculous. We tailored everything to them. I didn't respond right away. Madison's patience snapped. Natalie, she said, this is my career. I looked at her, then really looked. The confidence she'd worn all night had cracked just enough to show something else underneath. Not fear. Entitlement. If you know someone there, she continued, you owe it to me to help. Owe you, I repeated. My mother winced. Madison, what she said. We're family. I nodded once. We are. So she pressed. I felt the room still around us, my parents watching closely now, the staff pretending not to listen as they folded napkins and stacked chairs. I can't introduce you to my husband, I said. The words landed cleanly. No emphasis, no pause. Madison blinked. What? My father frowned. Your husband? Yes, I said. Madison laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. That's not funny. I'm not joking. My mother's hand went to her mouth. Natalie. Madison shook her head. You don't even... She stopped herself and took a breath. This isn't the time. You asked, I said. Her voice rose. You're saying you're married to someone at Ross Dynamics? Yes. That's impossible, she said. I would know. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and held it out to her without a word. She didn't take it right away. She stared at the screen like it might disappear if she waited long enough. My father leaned in. My mother's breath caught. Madison's hand finally closed around the phone, her eyes scanning the image, then the date beneath it. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked up at me, color draining from her face. How long, she asked. 4 years, I said. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was absolute. My father sat down heavily in the nearest chair. My mother stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Madison's grip tightened around my phone. You knew, Madison said slowly. You knew this entire time. I knew what I asked. That I was pitching to your husband, she said. Yes, her voice sharpened. And you said nothing. I didn't see a reason to. Her jaw clenched. I let you do your job, I said. Madison's breath came faster now. This is unbelievable. I took my phone back gently and slipped it into my clutch. You asked if I knew anyone there, I said. I answered. She looked at my parents, searching for support. She sabotaged me. I didn't, I said. I didn't touch your proposal. You could have helped, she shot back. You could have made this go away. I met her eyes steady. That's not how it works. Madison laughed again, this time hollow. Of course you'd say that. My father rubbed his temples. Natalie, he said, why didn't you tell us? I thought about answering that question the easy way. I didn't. Because 6 years ago I said Madison told me men like him don't end up with women like me. Madison's mouth opened, and tonight I continued. She told a room full of people I'm unlovable. No one spoke. The staff moved quietly around us, finishing their work, the room emptying piece by piece as the night wore on. Madison's fingers tightened around the phone like she might crack the screen if she squeezed hard enough. She looked down at the photo again, zoomed in, then out, as if a different angle might change what she was seeing. This isn't real, she said more to herself than anyone else. You don't just marry someone like that and not tell your family. I took the phone back and slipped it into my clutch. I didn't announce it, I said. I got married. My mother sat down slowly, her knees giving way before she seemed to notice. 4 years, she said. You've been married 4 years. Yes, and you never thought to mention it. My father added, his voice tight. You were busy, I said. There was always something important happening. Madison let out a short, broken laugh. This is insane. You knew I was pitching to Ross Dynamics. You knew who he was. Yes, and you watched me work on that deal for months, she said. You watched me talk about it tonight. Yes, her voice climbed. And you didn't think to say, hey, by the way, you're talking to my husband? I didn't think it was relevant, I said. That's a lie, she snapped. You wanted this. You wanted me to fall on my face. I shook my head. I wanted you to be evaluated the same way everyone else is. My father looked between us. Natalie, he said carefully, did you influence this decision? No, I said. Daniel reviewed the proposal before he knew who Madison was to me. He didn't like it. Madison scoffed. Of course he didn't. Because you told him not to. I told him to treat it like any other submission, I said. No favors. That's not how this works, she said. People help family. In some industries, I said. Not this one. She stared at me like she was trying to decide whether to argue or scream. My entire promotion depends on that contract. That was your choice, I said. You built your timeline around a deal you didn't control. My mother shook her head slowly. I don't understand any of this. That's okay, I said. You weren't supposed to. Madison paced once, then stopped. You've been lying to us, she said. All these years. No, I said. I've been living quietly. Driving that old car, she said bitterly. Wearing the same clothes. Letting everyone think what I asked. She stopped herself, jaw tightening. My father spoke instead. We thought you were struggling. I wasn't, I said. I just wasn't performing. Madison looked up sharply. So this is revenge. I didn't answer right away. She took that as confirmation. You waited until the perfect moment. Publicly. You let me humiliate myself. You humiliated yourself, I said. I didn't put a microphone in your hand. Her face flushed. You're enjoying this. I'm not, I said. I'm done explaining. The sound of a car pulling up outside cut through the tension tires crunching lightly on gravel. Madison froze. My phone vibrated once in my clutch. I checked the screen and slid it away. "He's here," I said. My mother's eyes widened. "Here." "Yes." Madison laughed again, thin and sharp. "You planned this." "No," I said. "He was picking me up." "At an engagement party," she said. "Very subtle." "Dinner," I said. "We're running late." The front doors opened, letting in a wash of cool night air. Footsteps crossed the entryway, steady and unhurried. Daniel stepped into the room like he belonged there because he did. No suit jacket, just a tailored shirt and dark slacks. His expression calm, eyes scanning until they found me. "There you are," he said, smiling. "Sorry I'm early." My father stood abruptly. My mother pressed her hands together. Madison went still. Daniel glanced at the half-packed room, the stacked chairs, the staff pretending very hard not to listen. Then he looked back at me. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said. He nodded, then turned to my parents. "You must be Natalie's family," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Daniel." My father shook it automatically. "You're Daniel Ross." "That's right." My mother let out a breath she'd been holding. "You're married to our daughter." Daniel smiled, happily. Madison stepped forward, her voice tight. "You're the CEO." "Yes." "And you rejected my firm." Daniel met her gaze evenly. "I declined your proposal." "Permanently," she said. "Yes." She laughed, sharp and humorless. "Because she told you to." "No," Daniel said. "Because it wasn't a good fit." "That's impossible," Madison said. "You didn't even—" "I reviewed it thoroughly," he said. "With my team." Her hands clenched into fists. "You didn't give us a chance." "You had one," he said. "You used it." Madison turned to me. "You could have stopped this." "I could have interfered," I said. "I didn't." Daniel glanced at me briefly, then back to her. "Natalie doesn't involve herself in my business decisions," he said. "That boundary matters." Madison's shoulders sagged just a fraction. "This is because I said—" Daniel raised a hand, not unkindly. "This isn't about what you said tonight." She stared at him. "It's not—" "No," he said. "It's about what you submitted." The room felt smaller, now the walls closer. The staff moved more quickly, clearly eager to finish and leave us to it. Daniel turned back to me. "Ready?" "Yes." My mother stood reaching for my arm. "Natalie, wait." I paused but didn't turn back. Madison's voice cut in. "You could still fix this." I looked at her, then really looked. The confidence was gone. The certainty had collapsed inward, leaving something brittle behind. "No," I said. "I couldn't." Daniel opened the door, holding it for me. The cool air washed over us again, sharp and clean. Behind us, the ballroom lights dimmed further. As the last chairs were stacked, the celebration reduced to echoes and leftover cake. The car door closed with a solid click, the kind that seals sound out cleanly. Daniel adjusted the mirrors without asking anything, letting the silence do its work. Streetlights slid across the windshield in steady intervals as we pulled away, the city settling back into its usual rhythm. My phone vibrated once, then again, then a third time. I didn't look at it. Daniel didn't either. Traffic was light. He took the familiar route without checking the navigation, one hand resting on the wheel, the other relaxed at his side. "Do you want to talk?" he asked. "Or do you want quiet?" "Quiet," I said. He nodded and turned the radio on low. Something instrumental that didn't ask for attention. The tension in my shoulders eased a notch. Not relief, alignment. By the time we reached home, the messages had stacked up. Missed calls, voicemails, a few texts that tried different tones, confused, angry, wounded. I set my clutch down by the door and kicked off my shoes, the hardwood cool under my feet. Daniel poured 2 glasses of water and handed me one. "You didn't cross a line," he said, not waiting for a response. "In case that's where your head is going." "I know," I said. He leaned against this counter, watching me the way he did when he was checking for cracks that didn't need filling. "They'll call this sabotage." "They already did," I said. "Good," he said lightly. "It means they don't understand the rules." That night the calls kept coming. I listened to a few voicemails while I changed, then stopped. There was nothing new in them, just different attempts at the same argument. Family helps family. You had leverage. You used it. I didn't. In the morning, the noise followed me to work in smaller, sharper pieces. A text from my mother asking if we could talk. One from my father asking why I hadn't trusted them. Madison left a voicemail that started controlled and ended brittle, accusing me of enjoying the damage of waiting for a moment to strike. I let them sit. At the office, my day ran like it always did. Briefings, systems checks, a meeting that ran long because someone hadn't read the attachments. I corrected a misinterpretation without raising my voice and moved on. No one asked about my family. No one needed to. At lunch, I stepped outside and finally returned a call. Not Madison's. My mother answered on the second ring. She didn't start with anger. She started with hurt. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked. Like the question itself explained everything. "I didn't want commentary," I said. She paused. "Commentary? Yes," she sighed. "We thought you were struggling. You thought I was failing," I said. "There's a difference. That's not fair. It's accurate." She tried again. "Madison's saying you could have fixed this." "I could have interfered," I said. "That's not fixing." She didn't answer right away. I could hear dishes in the background, the ordinary sounds of a house trying to feel normal. "Families help each other," she said finally. "Families don't put each other on display and call it concern," I said. Her breath caught. "She didn't mean, she meant it," I said. And even if she didn't intent, doesn't erase impact. The conversation circled for a few minutes, never landing anywhere solid. I ended it before it could turn into a negotiation. Madison's call came later, relentless in its persistence. When I answered, she didn't waste time. "You destroyed my career," she said. "I declined to rescue it," I said. "That's the same thing." "No," I said. "It isn't. You knew the decision maker," she said. "You had influence." "I had a relationship," I said. "I didn't use it." She laughed sharply. "That's convenient." "What's convenient," I said, "is pretending merit doesn't matter." She accused me of hiding behind principles. I pointed out that she'd built her timeline on assumptions. She said I'd embarrassed her in front of her peers. I reminded her she'd done the same to me first. "This is revenge," she said. "It's boundaries," I said. "You don't get to insult me publicly and then ask me to move mountains for you privately." She went quiet for a moment, then shifted tactics. "If you cared about me at all." "I care," I said. "I don't comply." That stopped her. The fallout didn't come all at once. It arrived in updates. Madison didn't lose her job. She lost momentum. Meetings cooled. Emails took longer to come back. The promotion she'd spoken about confidently was no longer mentioned in the same sentences as her name. People noticed. They always do. At a family dinner a week later, the air felt thinner. My father tried to bridge the gap with neutral topics. My mother watched Madison closely, like she was waiting for a misstep. Madison herself oscillated between wounded silence and clipped remarks, her confidence now something she had to consciously assemble. When the conversation turned to the deal, she bristled. It wasn't about quality, she said. It was politics. Daniel wasn't there, but his absence didn't make him smaller. It was about fit, I said. And compliance, she scoffed. You always hide behind rules. I work in environments where rules keep people alive, I said. They're not optional. My father cleared his throat. Natalie, he said, do you understand how this looks? Yes, I said. It looks like I didn't bend. He frowned. For family. I didn't bend against family, I said. I refused to bend the process. Madison slammed her fork down. You enjoyed saying no. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't enjoy being put in that position. Silence followed, not dramatic, just heavy. The kind that forces people to sit with their assumptions. Later, my mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. We didn't know you, she said quietly. I know, I said. She nodded, eyes damp. We want to fix that. Then stop asking me to be smaller so other people can feel bigger, I said. The weeks smoothed out the edges in their own way. Madison stopped calling as often. When she did, her tone was different, less accusatory, more measured. She didn't ask for favors anymore. She asked questions cautiously, like someone relearning a map. I didn't gloat. I didn't explain myself again. I held the line and went back to my life. At home, Daniel and I fell into our routines. Work dinners that didn't involve negotiations, mornings that started without checking messages. The noise receded to a manageable level. One evening, as we sat on the balcony watching traffic move below, Daniel handed me my phone. Your sister texted, he said. She wants to talk. I looked at the screen. The message was short. No accusations, no demands, just a request. I set the phone down between us and took a sip of water. The city hummed, systems in motion, lights changing on schedule. I didn't answer right away. The coffee cup warmed my hands more than I expected, the paper sleeve rough against my palms as I sat across from my parents at a small table near the window. The cafe was busy, but not loud, the kind of place where conversations blurred into background noise and no one paid attention to anyone else's discomfort. My mother stirred her drink without taking a sip. My father watched the street outside like he was waiting for instructions to appear in traffic lights. "We owe you an apology," my mother said finally. I didn't nod. I didn't say thank you. I waited. "We made assumptions," my father added, "about your life, about what mattered to you." "You didn't ask," I said. "You filled in the blanks." My mother's eyes flicked up. "We thought you needed help." "You thought I was failing," I said again. "Because that fit the story." She pressed her lips together. "We didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said. "But intent doesn't change outcome." That phrase landed differently this time. My father exhaled slowly and leaned back in his chair. "We didn't treat you fairly." "No," I said. "You treated me conveniently." We talked for a while after that, not arguing, not fixing, just laying things out the way they were without polishing the edges. They asked about my work, about Daniel, about the choices I'd made without narrating them to the family. They listened more than they spoke. That alone was new. When we stood to leave, my mother hugged me carefully, like she was learning how. "We want to do better," she said. "I'll let you," I said. Over time, Madison waited longer. When she asked to meet, she picked a neutral place. Same cafe, same table by the window. She arrived early and stood when she saw me, like this was a job interview. She couldn't afford to mess up. She didn't start with excuses. "I'm not making managing partner this year," she said. I sat down and wrapped my hands around my cup. "I know. The Ross deal killed my momentum," she continued. "People stopped returning calls the same way." "That happens," I said. She nodded. "I've been in therapy." That surprised me enough to register. I didn't comment. "I needed to understand why I needed you to be less," she said. "Why I built my confidence on comparison." I waited. She met my eyes. "I'm sorry." Not theatrically, not defensively, just flat and uncomfortable. "I spent years calling you difficult," she said. "Unlovable." I said it like I was helping. I wasn't. "No," I said. She swallowed. "I needed to be the successful sister. And for that to work, you had to be the one who didn't quite get there." I let the words settle. "That's accurate." She winced, then nodded. "I don't expect you to fix anything, or help me, or trust me." "Good," I said. "Because those aren't things you ask for." She managed a small, tired smile. "I know." We talked for a while after that. Not about deals, not about work, about boundaries, about what she could and couldn't expect from me going forward. I was clear. No public commentary about my life. No using me as a reference point. No access to Daniel through me. She agreed without pushing. Life didn't transform overnight. It adjusted. My parents stopped introducing me as the other daughter. They started using my name. At family dinners, questions came to me first sometimes. Not because I'd married well, but because they were learning to pause before assuming. Madison recalibrated more slowly. She stayed at her firm, quieter now, less performative. When she talked about work, it was grounded. Fewer assumptions, more specifics. She stopped dropping names like they were currency. Daniel and I hosted a small dinner a few months later. No speeches, no announcements, just food conversation and a guest list built on people who knew us as we were. My parents came. Madison came. She brought a bottle of wine and asked where to put it instead of announcing what it cost. My father wandered through the apartment, stopping in my office to look at framed certificates he'd never seen. "You built this," he said quietly. "Yes," I said. "I'm proud of you," he added like he was testing the words. I believed him. Madison stood on the balcony later looking out at the city lights. "I thought success looked like titles," she said. "Turns out, it looks like this." I didn't argue. A year passed, then another. Madison showed up to our anniversary dinner with a different energy. Less sharp, more present. She talked about learning how to build relationships without using them. She listened when Daniel spoke instead of calculating what he could offer. Late in the evening, she raised her glass toward me. "You were right," she said. "About everything." I tilted mine in return. "I know." She laughed, a real one this time. "I don't say that often." "I've noticed." The night settled into something comfortable after that. No performances, no comparisons, just people occupying the space they'd earned. When we left, Daniel's hand found mine automatically steady and familiar. The city moved around us, lights changing on schedule systems working the way they were meant to. Madison once called me unlovable. What she never understood was that love wasn't something I was missing. It just wasn't something I was advertising. I didn't win by being louder. I didn't win by humiliating anyone back. I won by standing still and letting the truth hold its ground. Family revenge stories don't always end with shouting or cutoffs. Sometimes they end with boundaries, consequences, and people finally seeing you clearly when it's already too late to rewrite the story they told about you. My sister mocked me as unlovable, but the real damage wasn't the words. It was the years of assumptions behind them. If you're drawn to revenge stories rooted in family drama, quiet justice and real-life consequences that could actually happen, this channel is for you. Subscribe and stay. There are more stories like this, calm on the surface, powerful underneath.